I drove down the familiar coastal road, windows open, the salty wind teasing what was left of my hair. That little blue bungalow by the Atlantic had been my pride for 30 years, a humble house, nothing fancy, but it smelled of summers, barbecues, and memories of my late wife, Helen. The seagulls still screamed over the roof like they always did, and the same rusted mailbox leaned toward the road, as if bowing to greet me home. But as I pulled into the driveway, my smile froze. 3 shiny SUVs stood parked like they owned the place. Not one was mine. I heard laughter from inside, loud, careless laughter. Toys scattered across the porch. A plastic flamingo I never bought stood guard by my steps, and through the open window came the voice I least wanted to hear. "Hey, old freeloader," said my son-in-law Tyler, standing in my doorway wearing my beach hat, holding a blender of what smelled like a very expensive margarita. "Didn't expect you back so soon. We kinda moved in." I blinked, half thinking it was a joke. "Moved in? Tyler? This is my house." He shrugged. "Yeah, about that. Your daughter said you spend most of your time in the retirement place now. We figured this was the perfect summer spot for the kids." Behind him, my daughter, Melissa, looked away, pretending to be busy with sunscreen. Their twins were throwing seashells at the TV. I took a breath, smiled politely, and said, "It's all right, son. I'll manage." He smirked, patting my shoulder like I was the guest. "Good man. There's a motel down the road. Tell them Tyler sent you." I chuckled quietly as I walked back to my car. Because if there's one thing age teaches you, it's that silence is the most powerful answer. He thought that was the end of it. But oh no, the game had just begun. I didn't go to that motel, of course. You think I'm paying $90 a night to sleep beside tourists who snore through their noses and eat instant noodles at midnight? Not a chance. I drove to the old pier, parked under the same crooked palm that's been threatening to fall since the Reagan years, and sat there for a while, watching the tide roll in. The ocean has this way of calming you down like it's whispering, "Don't worry, old man. I've seen worse." And maybe it had. I'd weathered storms, funerals, and grandkids with iPads louder than hurricanes. But being kicked out of my own home? That was a first. Still, instead of getting angry, I got hungry. There's a small shack near the beach where I used to take Helen every Friday. Marty's Clams and Amp. Freeze. The same waitress, Patty, still works there, bless her soul, though she now moves slower than the ketchup bottle. She saw me walk in and said, "Well, if it isn't the Sea King himself, where's your crown, Joe?" I grinned. "My son-in-law's wearing it now. Apparently, I've been dethroned." She laughed so hard she nearly dropped her tray. "Oh, don't tell me Tyler moved his circus into your place." "Front row tickets and everything," I said, sipping my coffee. "But don't you worry, the show's not over yet." That night, as I sat in my car by the pier, watching the moon paint silver stripes across the waves, a little idea began to form in my head. It started as a joke, then turned into something better. Let's just say if Tyler wanted to live by the sea, I was going to give him the full ocean experience. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of gulls fighting over a half-eaten sandwich on my windshield. One of them stared at me like I owed him rent. "Relax, pal," I muttered, shooing him away. "You're not the only one squatting on my property." I stopped by a local hardware store, picked up a few things: a bucket, a shovel, a handful of for sale signs, and most importantly, a big red cooler full of fresh fish. The cashier gave me a puzzled look. "Big fishing trip?" he asked. "You could say that." I smiled. "But I'm not catching fish. I'm returning them." See, Tyler had always bragged about being a beach guy. He'd wear those neon shorts and talk about the ocean vibe, even though he couldn't tell a seashell from a soap dish. So I decided to help him feel truly one with nature. That evening, when they went out for dinner, I paid a quiet visit to my own house. I still had my spare key hidden behind the same cracked garden gnome since 1993. Some things you just don't forget. Inside, everything was different. My cozy wooden shelves had been replaced with fake modern decor that looked allergic to personality. They'd even moved Helen's old seashell lamp into the garage. The garage! I could almost hear her voice whisper, "Joe, Don't you let that man mess with my lamp. So, I didn't. I carefully placed a few of those fresh fish under the couch cushions, inside the curtain rods, and my personal favorite behind the air vents. A little aromatic surprise for my dear Tyler and his beach-loving family. When I left, I made sure to wave at the neighbor, Mrs. Connors. She's 82, sharp as a knife, and the town's unofficial news broadcaster. "Evening, Joe," she called. "You back home?" "Just visiting," I said with a wink. "But don't tell the new tenants. I'm planning a housewarming." The next morning, that house would start to smell like a seafood festival run by the devil himself. And that was only the beginning of my little lesson. By the next afternoon, I was back at Marty's Clams and Amp. Fries, sitting on my usual stool with a cup of burnt coffee that tasted like regret. Patty slid over a plate of fries and leaned in. "So," she whispered like we were plotting a bank heist, "did the sea breeze hit your son-in-law yet?" I chuckled. "Let's just say the tide's turning, and it's bringing a certain aroma." She slapped the counter, laughing so loud the cook peeked out. "Joe, you're bad. What'd you do?" I raised a brow. "Nothing illegal. Just introduced Tyler to authentic ocean living. The kind that lingers." Around 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was my daughter, Melissa. Her voice sounded pinched, like she was holding her nose and her patience. "Dad, have you been here?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said calmly. "I built that house, remember?" "Well," she hissed. "It smells like something died in the walls. Tyler thinks a raccoon got in." I smiled into my fries. "Tell Tyler I warned him about letting animals move in." There was a pause. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Only as much as a man can enjoy poetic justice with extra tartar sauce." That night, I parked down the street just to watch the show. The whole family was outside, windows open, waving towels and spraying air freshener like exorcists. Tyler was wearing a shirt over his face, barking orders. "Find it! It's in the vents!" The twins were gagging dramatically on the lawn. Even the neighbor's dog refused to walk near the porch. I laughed so hard, I nearly choked on my coffee. Then I saw Mrs. Connors across the street, watching too. She raised her iced tea and mouthed, "You did this?" I just tapped my nose and said, "The ocean works in mysterious ways." But as the sun went down, watching them stumble around in chaos, I started to feel something unexpected. Not guilt, exactly, but a strange tug in my chest. That house had once been filled with warmth and laughter, not cheap perfume and shouting. Maybe, I thought, it was time for Tyler to learn that some things money or air freshener can't fix. And the next lesson? Oh, that one would hit him right where it hurt most. His precious pride. The smell war raged for 3 full days. Tyler called in an odor removal specialist, a young guy with a man bun and a tool belt full of gadgets that beeped for no reason. I watched from my car through binoculars, sipping iced tea like it was a crime documentary. The poor specialist entered my house all confident, but within 5 minutes he stumbled back out, eyes watering, gagging into the azaleas. Tyler handed him $100 anyway, like that would make the air fresher. Spoiler, it didn't. By sunset, they had every window open and 3 candles burning per room. Melissa stood on the porch, holding a can of Febreze like a weapon. Tyler, red-faced and sweating, yelled, "This house is cursed, Melissa! I swear your father left some voodoo fisherman stuff in here." I nearly spit my drink. Voodoo fisherman stuff. Now that's a first. That night, I sat by the pier again. The air smelled like salt and irony. Helen used to say revenge was a young man's game, but I was starting to think it's just a patient man's hobby. Still, I wasn't doing this out of spite. I just wanted Tyler to understand what it feels like to take something you didn't earn. That house wasn't just walls and windows, it was memories, laughter, burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings. You can't buy that. As I stared at the moonlit water, my phone buzzed again. Text from Melissa. "Dad, Tyler wants to sell the house. Says it's haunted. Please talk to him." "Haunted, huh?" I smiled. Maybe I would talk to him in my own way. Because if the smell didn't teach him humility, the next thing surely would. And this time, I wouldn't even have to step inside. The following morning, I put on my cleanest shirt, the one Helen bought me for our 30th anniversary, that still smelled faintly of her lavender soap, and walked into town. If I was going to teach Tyler something about respect, I needed a little help from my old friend, Irony. First stop, the local real estate office. The same one where I'd bought my bungalow all those years ago. The lady at the desk, Carol, squinted at me over her glasses. Joe Simmons? Well, I'll be. You still kicking? Barely, I grinned. But enough to sign a few papers. See, Tyler had been too busy playing Beach Baron to check property records. The house wasn't in my name, it was in the Simmons family trust, which meant only the trustee could legally rent, sell, or move in. And guess who the trustee still was? That's right, the old freeloader himself. So I asked Carol to print me a few "for sale by owner" signs. Big, bright, impossible to ignore. Then I took my old folding chair, a cold soda, and set up camp right across the street from my own front yard. You should have seen Tyler's face when he stepped outside and found me sitting there, sunglasses on, straw hat tilted, sipping my drink while the signs fluttered in the breeze. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, stomping toward me. "Estate business," I said calmly. "The property's going back on the market. Might fetch a nice price with all the fishy renovations you've done." He blinked, confused. "You can't sell this place, we live here." I smiled. "Correction. You squat here. The legal term is different, but the smell fits." Mrs. Connors from across the street came out with her poodle and yelled, "About time someone cleaned up that mess, Joe!" Tyler's ears went red. He pulled his phone, muttering something about calling his lawyer. I leaned back in my chair and said, "Oh, please do." He'll love explaining family trusts over lunch. He stormed inside, slamming the door so hard a seagull flew off the roof in protest. I just laughed to myself. Because for the first time in weeks, the air around that house smelled clean, fresh, even. And I wasn't done yet. The next step would make Tyler question whether he ever really owned anything at all. That night, I slept better than I had in months, right there in my old pickup by the beach. The sound of the waves was my lullaby, and the thought of Tyler tossing in confusion inside my bed was the cherry on top. By morning, the whole neighborhood knew. Word travels faster than Wi-Fi when you're dealing with retirees. Mrs. Connors had already told the postman, the ice cream man, and probably the mayor that Joe Simmons is selling his house right out from under his son-in-law's flip-flops. When I strolled up the street, coffee in hand, two neighbors were trimming hedges just to eavesdrop better. One of them called out, "Heard your place is for sale, Joe!" "You taking offers?" I smiled. "Depends who's buying. I'm partial to folks who can tell the difference between hosting and invading." Just then, Tyler burst through the front door, wild-eyed, hair sticking up like a storm cloud. "Joe, you can't do this!" "Do what? Sit on a public sidewalk?" I asked, taking a slow sip. He waved a folder at me. "I talked to a lawyer." "Ah, yes. And what did he say?" Tyler glared at the folder like it had betrayed him. He said, "You're the legal trustee." "Glad he's keeping up," I said. "Good man." Melissa came up behind him, holding a mug that said, "Good vibes only, irony at its finest." "Dad, please, can we talk? Maybe we overstepped a little." "A little?" I raised an eyebrow. "Melissa, you moved into my home, threw out your mother's lamp, and called me a freeloader. That's not overstepping. That's parkouring into disrespect." Even she laughed a bit, and I saw a flash of the girl I used to know, the one who'd steal my tools to build sandcastles. Tyler, though, was fuming. "You're ruining this family," he barked. I leaned forward. "No, son. You did that when you mistook kindness for weakness." The silence that followed was sweeter than any victory. Even the seagulls seemed to pause mid-scream. But I wasn't looking for applause. I had one last act planned, something that would settle everything once and for all. And this time, even Tyler would have to laugh. Eventually. A few mornings later, I woke up early and drove to the marina. There's something about the smell of fresh salt air that makes a man feel 20 again until his back reminds him otherwise. I rented the same fishing boat I'd used for years, the Helen Marie, still named after my late wife, though the paint was peeling like sunburn. I had an idea, the kind Helen would have called half crazy, half brilliant. See, Tyler was still stomping around the house pretending to be lord of the manor, but I knew one thing about him. He loved an audience. He'd brag about owning my place to anyone who'd listen. So I gave him an audience, just not the one he expected. That Saturday, I invited half the town for a goodbye barbecue. Flyers went up at Marty's Clams and AMP. Fry's, the library, even the senior center. The headline read, "Farewell cookout at Joe Simmons' beach house, everything must go." And oh, did they come. Dozens of retirees in floppy hats, kids with lemonade stands, even Mrs. Connors brought her poodle in a sailor outfit. When Tyler came outside, holding a spatula and wearing confusion instead of sunscreen, he froze. "What's happening here?" he shouted. I raised my burger tongs like a microphone. "Just saying goodbye to the old place, son. Figured you wouldn't mind me hosting one last party before the new owner moves in." The crowd clapped, thinking it was all in good fun. Tyler's face turned the color of a lobster in a sauna. "You can't do this! This is my house!" he yelled over the music. "Technically," I said into the tongs, "it's the family trust's house. And technically, the family's here." The laughter that followed could have powered the town for a week. Even Melissa tried to hide her smile behind her drink. When he slammed the door and disappeared inside, I turned to Patty, who was grilling shrimp like a champion. "Think he'll calm down?" She grinned. "If he doesn't, just tell him ghosts get hungry too." We all laughed, and for a moment, it felt like Helen was there, laughing with us, her soft voice carried by the wind. I looked at that house, shining under the afternoon sun, and realized something. Revenge wasn't the real reward. It was the reminder that I'd built something worth fighting for, and that no one, not even a loudmouth son-in-law, could take that away. But the night wasn't over yet, because when the sun set, Tyler made one final mistake, and it was the funniest one yet. When the party finally quieted down and the crowd wandered off full of burgers, gossip, and nostalgia, the only sounds left were the soft hiss of the waves and the faint hum of Tyler's rage behind the locked door. I could practically hear his blood pressure from the porch. I decided to stay a bit longer, just to enjoy the moonlight. Mrs. Connors waved goodnight and whispered, "Don't let him near your grill, Joe. He looks like the type who'd burn water." She wasn't wrong. About 10 minutes later, Tyler stormed out with his phone in one hand and a suitcase in the other. "Congratulations, Joe! You win! We're leaving!" he barked. "Where to?" I asked, leaning against the railing. "The motel down the road. Tell them I sent you." He froze. The irony wasn't lost on him. Then came the kicker, his grand exit. In a show of pure drama, he decided to back his shiny SUV out of the driveway at full speed, forgetting that my neighbor's cement mailbox post had survived 4 hurricanes. Crunch. The front bumper kissed that post like it was long-lost family. His face turned the same color as the taillights. "Oh, don't worry," I said cheerfully. "Insurance should cover natural disasters." Even Melissa couldn't help it, she burst out laughing. The twins started clapping, thinking it was all part of some fun adult game. Tyler just stood there, motionless, holding the steering wheel like a man holding the last thread of his dignity. I walked over, gave his shoulder a gentle pat, and said, "Son, the beach teaches us all the same lesson: never fight the tide. You'll lose your car, your temper, and your pride." He didn't reply, just sat there in silence as the headlights dimmed and the smell of burnt rubber mixed with sea salt. That was the moment I realized the storm had passed. Not just the one in him, but the one in me, too. Still, I had one more surprise for my dear son-in-law. A calm, quiet ending, but one he'd never forget. The next morning was one of those perfect coastal Sundays, sunlight bouncing off the water, gulls arguing over a crust of bread, and the world pretending yesterday never happened. I brewed a cup of coffee from my thermos and sat on the pier, feeling like the king of peace itself. Then I saw Tyler's SUV creeping up the road. It was missing a bumper, a little duct tape on the side, and, by the looks of it, half his dignity. He stepped out in sandals and sunglasses, trying to look casual like nothing had ever gone wrong. "Morning, Joe," he said stiffly. "Well, look who the tide dragged in," I answered. "Car still floats?" He ignored that. "Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I sipped my coffee. You mean the one that kicked me out of my own house? He exhaled through his nose, the universal sign for, I deserve this but hate it anyway. Then he held out an envelope. Here, for you. Melissa and I talked. We want to pay rent for staying in the house, until we find our own place. I looked at that envelope thick, too. Maybe he'd learned something after all. But instead of taking it, I said, Keep it, Tyler. Money's not what that house is about. It's about family. You turned it into a vacation rental with Wi-Fi. He looked genuinely lost for words, which was a small miracle. Just don't lock me out again, I added, smiling. Next time, I might install a revolving door, for dramatic effect. He actually chuckled. The sound was new, humble, almost human. All right, Joe, he said, rubbing his neck. You win. I didn't win, I replied. You just stopped losing. For a long minute, we stood there in silence, two men who finally ran out of ways to fight and found peace in the quiet. But of course, peace never lasts long around me, because when I finally walked back to my bungalow later that day, there was a moving truck parked out front, and the man unloading boxes looked suspiciously familiar. I stood there, coffee still warm in my hand, staring at the scene like a man watching reruns of his own bad luck. The moving truck's ramp squeaked, and out came a fellow with a neon vest, a clipboard, and the unmistakable air of a man who'd packed too many boxes in his lifetime. You, Joe Simmons? He called. I was this morning, I said cautiously. Depends who's asking, the IRS or Destiny? He laughed, then nodded toward the house. Got an order here. Says to move furniture back into the property, living room, dining, 2 bedrooms. Paid in full by a Mr. Tyler Benton. I blinked. Wait, back into the property? Yup. Said something about making the place right again. And sure enough, out of the truck came my old sofa, the one with Helen's embroidery still on the cushions, the one Tyler had thrown into the garage like an unwanted memory. Next came my seashell lamp, then my fishing rods, even my old rocking chair that groaned like it missed me. Then Tyler appeared from around the truck, sweating but smiling, a sight rarer than an honest politician. Joe, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I thought maybe it's time to put things back the way they were. The house doesn't feel like home without, well, without you. For a second, I didn't say a word. I just looked at that lamp glowing in the sunlight, at the couch being carried through the door, and felt something tighten in my throat. Helen would have smiled at this moment, probably with a snarky comment like, Told you the sea breeze would knock sense into him. Finally, I said, Tyler, I'll admit it, you've surprised me. You sure this isn't an early April Fool's joke? He chuckled. No, Joe, it's just, I finally get it. This house wasn't built for me to own. It was built for us to belong. That line nearly broke me, not because it was poetic, but because I realized he actually meant it. Well, I said, patting his shoulder, if you're putting my stuff back, I might as well move in again. You got room for one more old freeloader? He grinned. Always. It was a rare, quiet moment of peace. But of course, peace never comes without a little chaos. And chaos, as fate would have it, was already waddling up the driveway in the form of Mrs. Connors holding her poodle and yelling, Joe! The whole neighborhood thinks you're selling tickets for another barbecue! Mrs. Connors marched straight up the path like a sheriff with a floral handbag. Her poodle, Sir Winston, pranced beside her wearing a bow tie that screamed, I gossip for a living. Joseph Simmons! She barked, pointing that handbag like a weapon. You promised me the next barbecue would have potato salad, not drama. Tyler froze mid-box unloading, completely lost. I just sighed. Relax, Betty. We're not hosting another party. Oh, nonsense, she said, waving her hand. Half the town's already setting up chairs. They think today's your housewarming comeback special. And sure enough, down the street came a slow parade of retirees hauling coolers, beach umbrellas, and folding chairs. Someone even brought a karaoke machine. Tyler looked at me in disbelief. You told people there was another party? I lifted my coffee. Not this time, but I may have left a few flyers at Marty's. For next summer. Guess they read the date wrong. His jaw dropped. Joe, what can I say? I shrugged. In this town, gossip travels faster than Wi-Fi and twice as loud. Within minutes, our yard turned into a festival again. People laughing, kids running around, someone singing Sweet Caroline, terribly off-key. The smell of burgers filled the air, my air. Then I noticed Tyler, standing on the porch, frozen like a man having an out-of-body experience. For a moment, I thought he'd snap again. But then, he smiled. He walked down the steps, grabbed the tongs from me, and said, "Move over, Joe. If this circus is happening, I'm grilling." The crowd cheered. Even Mrs. Connors yelled, "Now that's the spirit!" before handing him a plate of deviled eggs that looked like a culinary dare. I stood there, watching him flip burgers with the ease of a man who'd finally stopped trying to prove something. The kids danced, the sea breeze sang, and for the first time in years, my house felt alive again. And as the sun sank into the water, painting everything gold, I heard Helen's voice in my head, gentle, teasing, "Told you, Joe, the best revenge is happiness." But the night still had one more twist, the kind only life can cook up when you least expect it. As twilight melted into night, the music quieted down, the laughter softened, and the waves whispered just beyond the porch. People began to drift home, leaving behind paper plates, empty soda cans, and the faint smell of overcooked sausages. It looked like a battlefield of good memories, the kind that didn't hurt to remember. Tyler and I sat on the porch steps, two men who'd spent months fighting over walls, now just staring at the ocean like it was an old friend. He broke the silence first. "You know," he said, "I used to think you were stubborn, always needing control." I smiled. "I am stubborn. Ask anyone in a 20-mile radius." He laughed, shaking his head. "But now I get it. You weren't protecting a house. You were protecting her." He didn't have to say her name. Helen. The love that built those walls, the laughter that filled that living room. He got it now, finally. I looked at him for a long moment. "Tyler, I never wanted to be your enemy. I just wanted you to remember where you were standing on the shoulders of someone who worked 40 years to keep this place standing." He nodded, quiet, humbled. Then, as if the universe wanted to break the emotion before it got too heavy, Mrs. Connor's poodle suddenly darted onto the porch, snatched a hot dog bun off the table, and took off like a bullet. "Sir Winston, drop that bread, you scoundrel!" she screamed from the sidewalk. Tyler burst into laughter so hard he nearly fell over. I couldn't help but join him. The scene was ridiculous. An old woman chasing a bow-tied poodle through a crowd of folding chairs under a pink sky. And in that absurd little moment, something shifted. All the anger, all the pride, it just dissolved. For the first time in years, I felt my home breathe again. Tyler turned to me, wiping a tear from his cheek. "You know, Joe, maybe we should keep the house in the family. Forever." I raised my cup. "To forever, then. But next barbecue, you're in charge of the smell." We laughed until the stars came out. But I didn't know that one final surprise, Helen's surprise, was waiting for us inside that night. When the laughter faded and the last of the guests had gone home, Tyler and I went back inside to clean up. The place looked like a cheerful war zone ketchup on the doorknob, sand in the hallway, and one lonely flip-flop in the sink. Tyler groaned. "How did one party cause this much chaos?" I smirked. "You're asking the man who once found a crab in his toaster after a family reunion. This is nothing." We worked side by side, sweeping, stacking plates, quietly rebuilding a bit of peace between us. Then I noticed something on the bookshelf. It was a small wooden box carved with seashells. Helen's handwriting on top read, "Open when the house feels like home again." I froze. My throat tightened. She'd left it years ago. I'd forgotten all about it. Tyler saw my face. "What's that?" I sat down slowly, tracing the carving with my fingers. "It's from Helen," I said quietly. "She always knew when the storm would pass, even when I didn't." We opened it together. Inside was a folded letter and a small seashell, the same one she'd found on our first beach walk. Her handwriting, still steady and warm, read, "Joe, if you're reading this, it means the house is laughing again. Don't forget, homes aren't built from wood. They're built from forgiveness, from noise, From new mistakes. Let them in. The sea always brings things back, sometimes even love. I sat there in silence, the sound of the ocean humming through the open window. Tyler placed a hand on my shoulder, gentle, sincere. She sounds like she was something special, he said softly. She still is, I replied. She's the tide that keeps dragging fools like you back to shore. He laughed, wiping his eyes. Guess I deserved that. You did, I said, smiling. But you also earned your seat at this table. We placed the letter back in the box, right where it belonged, not as a relic, but as a reminder. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like ours. But before we turned in for the night, I had one last thing to say, something Helen would have wanted him to hear. I stood by the open window, the night breeze drifting through the curtains, carrying the faint sound of the waves. Tyler was finishing the dishes, humming. Terribly off-key, and for the first time, it didn't bother me. The house was alive again. Warm, real, human. I looked around the room, the seashell lamp glowing softly, the walls lined with family photos, the scent of grilled burgers still floating in the air, and I realized something. This wasn't just the home Helen and I built. It had become a bridge between what was and what could still be. Tyler walked over, drying his hands on a towel. You know, he said, I never understood why you loved this old place so much. It creaks, leaks, and smells like seaweed half the time. I chuckled. That's because you were too busy trying to own it, not live in it. Houses don't need to be perfect, Tyler. They just need to hold the right people. He smiled the kind of smile that told me he finally got it. We stood there a moment longer, both looking at that same horizon Helen and I used to watch together. The moonlight shimmered across the water, and I swear I could almost hear her laugh in the wind, that light, teasing laugh that always came right before she said, "Told you so." Joe. I smiled and whispered back, Yeah, you were right again." Tyler raised his glass. To Helen. I lifted mine. And to the old freeloader who finally learned that sometimes letting go is the best way to hold on. We clinked glasses. Outside, the tide rolled in, steady and forgiving, washing everything clean. Because in the end, revenge fades, but laughter, family, and a house full of noise, that's what really lasts. Every like, every comment, it truly keeps these stories alive. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and write in the comments where you're from. I read every one of them.